Welcome to USM's Child Abuse Awareness Minors on Campus Training Module, brought to you by the Office of Compliance and Ethics. For any questions regarding the content, please email compliance@usm.edu. Today we have 3 goals of training. Recognize the specific signs of child abuse. Familiarize yourself with the key components of the Minors on Campus policy. And understand your responsibility regarding the procedures involved. Abuse has lifelong consequences. Abuse effects occur on a continuum from the initial physical injuries through mental consequences of abuse that result in health concerns that are both cognitive and behavioral. These effects continue across the lifetime of the individual, potentially causing long-term health, educational, and service costs to society as a whole. One study estimated that these costs amount to as much as $100 million a year to help individuals who have suffered from abuse obtain the treatment they need. Moreover, research confirms there's a correlation between the increased incidence of depression, anxiety disorders, addictions, and personality disorders among those who suffer abuse. On the screen, you'll see the definition of child maltreatment, which is also known as child abuse and neglect. It is the abuse and neglect that occurs to children under 18 years of age. Within the category of child maltreatment, you will find a range of maltreatment, especially across different states with differing definitions of what constitutes certain types of abuse. From physical to emotional to sexual abuse, and ultimately exploitation can result that could lead to trafficking. All of this is made possible because there is a relationship between the child and someone who is responsible for them, someone whom they trust or who can exercise power over them. Even allowing a child to view intimate partner violence could rise to the level of child maltreatment. The most important thing to know is that harming a child is wrong. In Mississippi, a child who is sexually abused, exploited, emotionally abused, mentally injured, or non-accidentally physically injured or maltreated, that child has experienced child abuse. Myths about child abuse exist that can make it seem as if child abuse seldom occurs, must be violent or perpetrated by bad people, obvious or conducted by strangers. However, each of those statements are untrue. Abuse happens often in a variety of ways, many of which are not obvious. Many are done by people you would not identify as bad, and who are not strangers to children. A review of data from 2016 shows that millions of abuse cases were opened and thousands of deaths occurred even in 2016. Abuse is not a rare occurrence. In fact, it happens to some beginning at birth, with a higher number of girls being victimized than boys. Now let's move on to the 4 types of child abuse: emotional, physical, sexual, and neglect. According to the Mississippi Department of Child Protective Services, emotional abuse involves making statements aimed at hurting a child or engaging in behaviors that isolate or demean a child. Because such statements are likely made in private, it is the most difficult type of maltreatment to identify. Please take a minute or two to review the list of examples. From actual words such as name-calling to actions such as isolating or rejecting a child, emotional abuse is prevalent. When a child experiences bodily harm, they are a victim of physical abuse. From bruising to broken bones, physical abuse erodes a child's sense of safety and occurs even if the act was unintentional. Take a moment to review the list of examples of physical abuse. As you can see, it's a wide range of examples. Sexual abuse by definition involves inappropriate touching of the child by another person, from a friend to a stranger, and ranges from sexual acts to the prostitution of a child. Failing to meet the basic needs of a child represents the most common maltreatment, which is known as neglect. From failing to provide food, much less nutritious food, clothing, or appropriate shelter, to failing to provide medical care or adequate supervision, maltreatment happens more than you would expect. Now we've discussed the types of child abuse, we need to discuss about whose responsibility it is to report child abuse. Well, although some people talk about how certain professions are responsible for reporting child abuse, professions like doctors, dentists, nurses, psychologists, social workers, attorneys, ministers, cops, and school employees, The reality is that those professions are most likely to hear about or see child abuse. However, everyone is a mandated reporter in Mississippi. That means anyone who is listening to this video and each and every person throughout our campus, much less our town, county, or state, is responsible for reporting child abuse if they have reason to suspect abuse or neglect by a parent, legal custodian, or caregiver, or another person who is responsible for caring for the child. What is the definition of an abused child in Mississippi? According to Section 43-21105 of the Mississippi Code of 1972, annotated, an abused child is a child who has parents, guardians, custodians, or anyone who is responsible for their care or support, even if they're not legally obligated to support or care for them, that causes or allows the child to suffer sexual abuse, sexual exploitation, emotional abuse, mental injury, non-accidental physical abuse, or other maltreatment. However, physical discipline, including spanking, if performed by a parent or guardian or custodian in a reasonable manner, does not constitute abuse. So what does it take to report child abuse in Mississippi? Well, there are several ways to report abuse. You can call 1-601-432-4570, or nationally you can call 1-800-222-8000. You can report online, https://reportabuse.mdcps.ms.gov. You can also download the Mississippi Department of Child Protective Services, MDCPS, Report Child Abuse mobile app. And to report domestic violence 24/7, you can call 1-800-898-3234, or the Mississippi hotline for reporting domestic violence at 1-800-222-8000. When you call, please remember to provide the following information: the name of the victim, their address or the location in which they're at currently, the school information in terms of if you know their school, approximate age, race, and sex of the child, description of the situation, and any marks or bruises that may be present on the child's body, the person responsible for the victim's care, the person who is alleged to have perpetrated the abuse, and any witnesses to the situation. You'll also want to provide other relevant information that would expedite investigation, including whether or not there's drugs being manufactured in the home, if there's weapons where the child is located, or if the child is in a situation of domestic violence. Felony child abuse in Mississippi. On the screen, you will see displayed the definition of felony child abuse. I want to highlight some important aspects of the definition for you. To result in felony child abuse, it does not matter whether harm actually results. Moreover, the abuse must be intentional, knowing, or occur as a result of the reckless actions on the part of the person harming the child. The behaviors that fall under felony child abuse range from burning to intentionally striking the face or head of the child, condoning the abuse of a child or someone else, or selling or making drugs in the presence of a child. 3 other crimes are also included within felony child abuse: assault, domestic violence, or sexual battery with a child. Now let's go over the penalties for child abuse in Mississippi. As you see, there's 4 different types of penalties based on what has been perpetrated against the child. So for felony child abuse, for torture resulting in serious bodily injury, it's 5 years to life. For bodily harm, it's 2 years to 10 years. Multiple convictions for felonious abuse result in a life sentence. Condoning child abuse is a misdemeanor and can lead to 1 year imprisonment and a $1,000 fine. Child endangerment results in a maximum of 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. However, the sentence could increase to 20 years and a $20,000 fine if substantial harm occurs to the child's physical, mental, or emotional health as a result of the endangerment. Failing to report child abuse or false reporting, if it's done willfully, can result in a $5,000 fine and a 1 year jail sentence. Now let's go over some scenarios. These are potential child abuse scenarios, and we're just going to answer the question in terms of yes or no and why we think the scenario may be possible child abuse or potential child abuse. So in the first situation, students are asked to refrain from getting water during a 4-hour practice period. Is this child abuse? Take a few seconds to consider before we show you the answer. Yes, it is likely abuse due to the length of the period, 4 hours. This is 4 hours without water that could result in dehydration or an additional health concern. Water is a basic need, and depriving someone of that represents a form of abuse known as neglect. Scenario 2. You're in the woods. You walk by some campers who don't see you. They're talking freely amongst themselves, and Melanie, who's just 12 and is a camper, is talking to her other friends about how her boyfriend, who is a staff member, is supplying her with alcohol and asking them if they would like some. Question: does this constitute abuse that you should report? Take a few seconds to consider. Yes, alcohol sales and consumption to minors are illegal. The relationship between the parties is inappropriate and may be physical. You need to report this immediately. Scenario number 3. You see a child and it looks like they're being dragged. You're not sure if maybe you should report it or not. Should you wait for other signs of abuse? Should you tell your supervisor so they can decide? Do you need to be sure abuse is happening? Take a few seconds to consider. If you feel reasonably sure that it is abuse, report it. If you wait to observe additional signs, you increase the risk of further harm coming to the child. Abdicating your responsibilities to your supervisor is not permitted. You are a mandatory reporter, and you need to report any abuse that you observe. Scenario 4. Mike is another counselor, and it seems to you that he's paying more attention to the young campers in his group than to the other campers. He spends more time with them, he's often touching their shoulders, and he does know the personal details of their lives. He's very familiar with them. Question: do these actions represent red flags that justify your worry about how Mike is interacting with the campers, and should you be reporting this situation? Take a few seconds to consider. The answer is yes. Research shows that people who perpetrate sexual offenses engage in a process called grooming. That involves the offender targeting their victims, gaining their trust, and filling some need that the child has. The relationship evolves over time, and the offender increases the amount of time they spend with the child, and then begins to control them. Based on the signs you observed, you are right to be concerned and should report it. The next part of our training will involve reviewing the Minors on Campus policy. However, this review of the Minors on Campus policy does not replace your obligation to review the Minors on Campus policy in its entirety and sign the acknowledgement indicating that you understand and agree to abide by the policy prior to interacting with minors as part of your position. To access the policy, you'll go to https://usm.policystat.com. Once you're on that webpage, you're going to go ahead and type in minors, and Minors on Campus will appear. Please review the policy in its entirety, either online or print out a version using the print button. Once you print it out, you can review it on paper. To truly understand the Minors on Campus policy, we must become familiar with certain terms, including who is an authorized adult or program staff. Well, in fact, you are an authorized adult or program staff if you're going to be the one working with minors and you're 18 years old or older. You're going to be interacting, supervising, engaging, chaperoning, or otherwise overseeing the minors in the program or recreational activities or in residential facilities. Please note, this includes but is not limited to faculty, staff, volunteers, graduate or undergraduate students, interns, temporary agency employees, as well as independent contractors, potentially working as counselors, coaches, or instructors. However, within the definition of authorized adult or program staff, the following people are not included: temporary guest speakers, presenters, and other individuals who have no direct contact with program participants other than short-term activities supervised by program staff. Another important definition within the policy is the definition of minors. Per the policy, the term minor is defined as a person under 18 who is not enrolled or accepted for enrollment in credit-granting courses at the university. The following are not considered minors under the terms of the USM policy: students that are enrolled in university credit-granting courses while also enrolled in elementary school, middle school, or high school, unless they are also enrolled in a program overseen by or at USM that includes overnight housing at a university facility, as well as housing controlled by the university. University employees who are under 18 years of age are also not considered minors under the terms of the policy. Direct contact. This includes providing care, supervision, guidance, or control over minors or routinely interacting with them. Section 1 of the policy details one-on-one communication by definition and its prohibition in terms of the minors on campus. One-on-one contact is defined as the interaction that is personal and unsupervised in a non-public area between one authorized adult and a minor. And it also includes engaging in communications such as electronic communications via text, email, or social media that is personal and unsupervised between one authorized adult or program staff and a minor, without at least one other authorized adult, parent, or legal guardian present. In other words, make sure there's always another adult, whether it's a parent, legal guardian, or another authorized adult when you're communicating with a minor in person or electronically. You can provide group training, classroom, or outdoor activities. Just make sure it occurs in an open public area so that those outside the group can view the entire group at all times. In Section 2 of the policy, we discuss the duty to report. As we discussed before, everyone in Mississippi is a mandated reporter of potential child abuse. Therefore, Section 2 of the policy details how to report if you are working at USM. So you can call the following to report potential abuse of minor program participants: the University Police. The Hattiesburg number is 601-266-4986. The Gulf Coast number is 228-234-2068. Or you can also contact other law enforcement agencies immediately if the minor is in imminent danger due to suspected assault or abuse. You can also contact the Mississippi Department of Child Protective Services Abuse Hotline at 800-222-8000 and could provide a written report. The Title IX coordinator or their designee can also take a report of potential child abuse. Keep in mind, if there are violations of the Minors on Campus policy, including those related to violations of one-on-one contact prohibition or actions that cause concern for the health or safety of the minor, you should also contact Title IX coordinator or their designee at 601-266-6804. You can also contact the program director to report potential abuse unless the program director is involved in suspected abuse or assault. Once allegations have been made against an authorized adult, they are no longer able to participate in the program until the allegations are satisfactorily resolved. Section 3 of the USM Minors on Campus policy is entitled The Code of Conduct of Authorized Adults and Program Staff. Since authorized adults and program staff must maintain the highest standards of behavior, this section of the code indicates what they should refrain from doing. From contacting a minor on a one-on-one basis to encouraging minors to keep secrets from parents or guardians by using language indicating secrecy, the authorized adults and program staff should refrain from all the behaviors listed on the slide. Please take a few seconds to review the slide. Section 4 of the policy pertains to sponsoring units and sets forth the unit's obligations to designate a director, who shall be responsible for conducting and monitoring program activities and responsible for overall compliance with university policies, procedures, and guidelines, including developing rules to address safety and security, such as emergency notifications, communications, discipline, behavioral expectations, and conduct rules that should be provided to both participants and their parents. Remember, minors under the age of 8 cannot take part in residential programs, and everyone must adhere to university policies and other laws and regulations. You have to make sure you have staff members who are at least 21 years old on call and accessible to program participants. These individuals must reside in housing, if applicable, and ensure that you have added authorized adults to be sure that one-on-one contact with minors does not take place, and it also allows you to maintain adequate supervision levels. Section 4 of the Minors on Campus policy, entitled Duties of Sponsoring Units, also details the ratio between authorized adults and program participants, based on their age and based on whether it's a day camp or overnight camp. These are the ratios recommended by the American Camp Association. Do not forget that minors under 8 cannot participate in residential camps or programs. Take a few seconds to familiarize yourself with these ratios. Section 5 of the Minors on Campus policy deals with training. Each authorized adult undertakes annual mandatory training, such as you're currently taking, which at a minimum goes over their responsibilities as well as what is expected of them and the procedures per the USM Minors on Campus policy. Additionally, the training should cover appropriate crisis, emergency responses, safety, and security precautions, how medical emergencies are handled, the scope of university responsibility and liability, and the process for reporting suspected child abuse, and how to protect participants from abusive emotional and physical treatment. As an authorized adult, you need to sign an acknowledgement confirming you read and understand the Minors on Campus policy. The training provided must address all the elements listed in the prior slide. The program director must maintain documentation verifying the training has occurred, including the attendance certificates for training and the signed acknowledgments after you review the policy. These can all be audited by the Office of Compliance and Ethics. As to non-university entities, they must certify that they have provided training to program staff comparable to what the policy requires. Section 6 of the Minors on Campus policy, entitled Programs Rules of Conduct, requires that each program establish a clear set of rules of conduct and provide orientation to the participants relative to the university rules, program conduct rules, behavioral expectations, program safety and security, and university reporting for suspected child abuse, sexual abuse, or other crimes. Section 6 also details the rules of conduct, what should be included in them, and the fact that they should be provided to participants and their parents or legal guardians prior to participating in the program. On the screen, you see a list of the following common statements that must be included in each set of rules. As you see, some of the rules are about abiding by the university policies, while others are relative to what circumstances may lead participants to leave the property during a program. Take a few seconds to read through the statements. How to handle communications and notifications is detailed within Section 7 of the Minors on Campus policy. The sponsoring unit is tasked with establishing a procedure for notifying parents or legal guardians of an emergency for medical or behavioral issues, natural disasters, etc., maintaining a list of all participants and directors of program staff that include name, local, room assignment, gender, age, address, phone number of parent or legal guardian, and emergency contact information. Residential programs should also have a list of program participants and the program staff directory available for the University Police upon request. Parents or legal guardians should be made aware of how to contact participants during the program. Parents and legal guardians must be advised of all such information detailed in Section 7 prior to the start of the program, along with the participants. Section 8, entitled University Housing. This section deals with the sponsoring unit or program director's obligation when they're running a residential camper program for developing rules and regulations that properly supervise minors who will be residing in university housing. These rules and regulations should be provided to participants and parents or legal guardians before the program begins. Included in that information must be the following: written permission signed by the parent or legal guardian for the minor to reside in university housing, age-appropriate curfew time no later than midnight, restrictions on in-room visitation to forbid participants of a different gender from conducting in-room visitations, visitations by non-participant guests being forbidden unless they are parent or legal guardian during an emergency situation, and the program must also comply with all security measures and procedures described by the Department of Residence Life and University Police. Per Section 7 of the policy, the residential program shall also provide the University Police with a detailed list of the program participants and provide a directory of program staff if requested. Section 9 of the Minors on Campus policy is entitled Background Checks. Background checks are required annually except for temporary guest speakers, presenters, and any other individual who has no direct contact with program participants other than short-term activities that program staff supervise. The background check will include an NCIC criminal history check, a National Sex Offender Registry check, a driver's license check, and will require human resources to review and approve before the authorized adult or program staff member can begin working with the minors. The program director is responsible for receiving this clearance from human resources. Non-university entities are also required to comply with this requirement and provide evidence of the background check having been conducted in a manner comparable to the requirements in the policy. The authorized adult program staff is responsible for the cost of the background check unless the sponsoring unit offers to pay those costs. Authorized adults program staff are under a duty to disclose to the program director any arrests that take place after the background check and must disclose those within 72 hours of their occurring or immediately if they take place while working as an authorized adult or program staff. If concerning information is reported as a result of the background check, HR will comply with the Fair Credit Reporting Act requirements, and they will notify the program director of the report contents. As part of that process, they'll determine their level of concern. If the director is concerned, HR will provide the authorized adult with a copy of the report and instructions on how to dispute the accuracy. Meanwhile, the final decision on whether the individual will participate as an authorized adult will be made by HR in consultation with General Counsel. The results of the background check will be used only for this policy. However, USM reserves the right to act appropriately if falsification or failure to disclose information material to employment is discovered as a result of the background check. This includes actions up to and including termination. Human Resources will retain all correspondence regarding background checks. All contracts for independent contract services working with minors, a provision must be included assuring the contractor will comply with the background check process or provide evidence that they have undertaken a process comparable to that which is required under the policy. Section 10 of the policy addresses programs or camps directed by non-university entities, noting that they shall be operated consistent with the guidelines of this policy and reference this requirement in the contract along with a link to the Minors on Campus policy. Prior to using university facilities, non-university organizations that are going to be using university facilities for programs or camps must deliver a signed Facilities Use Agreement, Form B. certifying that the program meets the requirements set forth in the policy, along with the provisions relative to training, staff participant ratios, and background checks of authorized program staff. Form B can be found within the policy in the Forms section of the policy. Section 11 of the policy addresses releases and places the responsibility on the program director for obtaining a liability release form approved by General Counsel for use in the registration process for the program, with said release including a media, photo, and video release. Remember, data gathered is confidential, subject to record retention guidelines, and will not be disclosed except as provided by law. Section 12 addresses guidelines for medical treatment, administration of medicines, and emergency services. A waiver and consent for medical treatment, self-administration of prescription medication, and over-the-counter form, Form C, must be signed by the participant's parent or legal guardian to authorize any medicine being administered either by the program participant themselves or by a licensed healthcare professional. Any medication has to be in the original pharmacy container labeled with the participant name, dosage, and timing, or for the over-the-counter administration in its original container. Medication shall be stored in a secure location, and someone must meet with the participant for self-administration or to have a licensed healthcare professional administer the medication. At the time of the administration, a record must be kept of the date, time, and signature of the person supervising the medication administration. If the participants have self-administrable medications such as EpiPens or asthma inhalers, they can carry them during program activities. Program staff should also make reasonable efforts to have basic first aid kits and arrange for medical care based on the nature of the program activities, including on-site emergency care coverage if needed. Section 13 of the policy pertains to enforcement and details the specific sanctions for violating the policy, which are displayed on the screen. Please take a few seconds to review those. Section 14 of the policy is entitled Waivers. Section 14 directs program directors to contact the Director of Compliance and Ethics if they need a waiver. They will do so by filling out Form D, which is the Activity Request Exemption Form, and they'll email that form to the Director of Compliance and Ethics at compliance@usm.edu. The form will be reviewed, and additional supporting documentation may be required. The program director will be advised as to the final decision. Please note, for a waiver from any aspect of the policy, the following information must be submitted: the name of the person overseeing the program activity, the location of the minor participating, general nature of the activities of the program being undertaken or offered, the names of authorized adults or program staff participating directly with minors, administrative requirements of the program, including but not limited to waivers, permission slips, and medical emergency forms. Additional information on the Minors on Campus policy can be found on our website at www.usm.edu/compliance-ethics/minorsoncampus.php. Don't forget, the forms for the policy are contained within the Forms section of the policy on usm.policystat.com, and you can search for them under Minors on Campus and then look at the Forms section. And they include the 4 forms that are listed on the screen. The consequences of child abuse can be avoided if we stop child abuse. As a mandatory reporter, you have a duty to report child abuse, even if you're not sure. Stopping potential child abuse requires that you report potential abuse immediately. Quick reporting may mean the difference between life and death. Take time to review. Now let's take time to review any specific rules or guidelines issued by the program. Press pause to do so. Remember, as a representative of the program, you're responsible for being familiar with these rules or guidelines in addition to those set forth in the policy, as well as the laws that apply. Now let's review the Minors on Campus policy. Please stop this video so you have time to either read the print form or the online form of the Minors on Campus policy, which is available at usm.policystat.com. After you've completed reading the policy in its entirety, sign the acknowledgement of your understanding and agreement to abide by the Minors on Campus policy, which is Form A in the forms that are included as part of the policy on the PolicyStat site. Should you have any questions about the policy, please direct those to the program director, who can then reach out to the Office of Compliance and Ethics. Thank you for your time.